Well, I ask because some of your Democratic colleagues say that they don't think the administration has a clear end game in Iran. Do you have concerns about how they know when to be done with Iran?
Yeah, I mean,
Something pretty revealing just happened on CNN, and it says a lot about the political divide surrounding this conflict with Iran. Kaitlan Collins brought on Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman, a Democrat, at least in name. But instead of questioning the Trump administration's strategy or raising concerns about this escalating war, Fetterman spent much of the interview defending it, echoing arguments that sounded far more like the administration's talking points than the concerns many Democrats and voters across the country have been raising. At a time when Americans are asking serious questions about why the United States rushed into this conflict and what the actual end game is, Fetterman appeared more focused on praising the operation than scrutinizing it. That set the stage for a pretty tense exchange between Collins and the senator, one that revealed just how divided Washington is over this war. Like the video and subscribe right now. I've got some strong thoughts on this exchange. Let's take a closer look at this clip.
President Trump this week began referring to the war with Iran as an excursion. Asked today, which is it, excursion or war, the president offered this explanation.
You just said it is a little excursion, and you said it is a war. So which one is it?
Well, it's both. It's both. It's an excursion that will keep us out of a war, and the war is going to be. I mean, for them it's a war. For us, it's turned out to be easier than we thought.
And joining me tonight is Democratic Senator of Pennsylvania, John Fetterman. And thank you, Senator, for being here. Do you agree with President Trump when he says that he believes the United States has won the war at this point?
I think what I would agree with is that I think the outcome thus far has been outstanding. I mean, if you just look at the metrics, that the missile and the drone attacks are down in the 90%. And Iran really has been inability to just strike back and hit our assets or Israel much right now. So after eliminating all of the leadership after 7 or 8 days and achieving air supremacy after a couple days, I think overall, I think it's been an outstanding where we're at.
When do you think it would get to a point where you would call it a victory?
Well, I mean, who exactly knows? But I know Israel's going to continue to pound Lebanon and well as Iran now too. As now we can't forget exactly what's accomplished. They were able to eliminate most of the leadership and actually effectively destroyed their military apparatus. And the only thing that they've ever been to do is fire off a couple random drones and do the thing. They've been unable to impact about either the Israeli society or their military or ours here.
Well, I ask because some of your Democratic colleagues say that they don't think the administration has a clear end game in Iran. Do you have concerns about how they know when to be done with Iran?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much aware that I'm the only Democrat in the Senate that supports this operation, and I'm going to continue to do that. And I would remind all of your viewers, whether it was Hillary Clinton when she was running for president or Kamala Harris when she was running just in 24. In fact, she actually identified Iran as her top concern. You know, she called Iran a grave danger. And now every single Democrat agrees that they can never allow Iran to acquire a nuclear bomb. And now Donald Trump has done that, made that virtually impossible to achieve their nuclear weapons. And they've effectively broke the entire Iranian military apparatus. I don't know why we as Democrats, if we had all those kinds of goals and those kinds of concerns, and now that he's achieved that, why now we only can criticize that, or they could always make it seem like it's been a failure or things are out of control. That's just categorically not true. And now I think my hard red line, you know, boots on the ground. That's when I would get concerned if they start to talk about boots on the ground. And now I think even Secretary Hegseth has even said, no nation building, no nation building. No one wants to be a part of that. That was never a part of this mission thus far. When every single Democrat is, you know, have to sit back and witness Trump developing this kinds of situation, or every single Democrat wanted those things. Now, I'm not sure why they can't just acknowledge that that's been a positive outcome, whether that's just politics. For me, it's just been nothing more than a choice of country over what parts of the base would demand to condemn or pretend that it's a terrible situation.
Okay, so your red line is putting U.S. forces on the ground in Iran. The president said today that he views this both as a war and an excursion. When you talk to people in Pennsylvania, do they view this as an excursion?
I would see this as us achieving a critical goal, that I would remind people that whether it's Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris all agree we should never allow anyone to acquire a nuclear bomb. I would challenge any single member of the Democratic in the House. Are you okay with Iran acquiring a nuclear bomb? I don't think anyone is okay with that. And now Trump made that now virtually impossible. I can say I would describe that an incredibly positive development, something that we all Democrats support, or we all wanted to have those things.
But I think some people may take issue with the term excursion that the president has used, given U.S. forces have died as a result of this. How do you see that term?
I'm not getting into semantics. Call it what it is. I would call it as thus far incredibly successful, and that's very compatible with every of the wishes and the concerns of the Democratic presidential candidates, and now anyone that's serving in Congress, here in Pennsylvania or in any state in our country.
Here's the part that really stood out to me. John Fetterman tried to frame this whole situation as a choice between the country and the Democratic base, as if anyone who questions this war somehow isn't putting the country first. But that argument completely falls apart the moment you actually look at the numbers. Because the reality is, he's not just out of step with Democratic voters, he's out of step with the country as a whole. Across Democrats, independents, and even many Republicans, support for this conflict is sitting around 40%. Think about that for a second. That's lower than the Iraq War was at any point during its early stages. And Americans remember exactly how that story ended. One of the biggest reasons for that low support is how suddenly this all happened. The administration moved quickly into this conflict without really explaining the strategy, the risks, or the long-term plan to the American public. People feel like the country was pulled into another major confrontation overseas with very little transparency. And there's another reason Americans are skeptical. We've seen this movie before. After 2 decades of wars in the Middle East, a lot of people simply don't trust the early promises of quick victories and easy outcomes anymore. When officials claim everything is going perfectly, while reports suggest the situation on the ground is far more complicated, it raises serious doubts. Yet Fetterman is out there portraying this operation as a huge success and dismissing concerns coming from both voters and lawmakers. But the public mood right now is very different. A lot of Americans are looking at this conflict and asking the same question they've asked before. How does this actually end?
You mentioned how you differ from your colleagues, your other fellow Democrats. Every Senate Democrat except you signed a letter today to Secretary Hegseth asking for an investigation into that strike on a girls' school in Iran. Why did you not sign that letter, Senator?
Well, because we all agree that it's a tragedy having the school hit. Absolutely. And we all agreed now for an investigation. What I don't agree with the rest of my colleagues in the House is that it's a war of choice, or it's dumb, or all the things that my colleagues have described, this operation. I think it's a good thing, and I support that. So we agree that and actually the Pentagon is already investing it. They just acknowledged then that it seems increasingly likely that we were now on that. And now I think it's entirely appropriate. Just like my colleague from Louisiana said, it's like, we should apologize that. That's a tragedy. And I would remind everybody listening right now, the United States never, ever target civilians. Iran does, and including their own citizens. And they massacred 35,000 of them just a couple of weeks ago. And the left, please, the left media is much more angry, about or talking about this hospital, and it is a tragedy. But they didn't seem to be as concerned about the Iranians massacring tens of thousands of their young people just a couple of weeks ago too. So we agree on many parts of it, but we both disagree. I mean, we all disagree that I think it's a good thing, and every single other Democrat in the caucus caused it all kinds of in negative terms.
We did cover the protest in Iran extensively here at CNN. Obviously, they said a lot about how internally people felt about the regime. But just to be clear, you do believe if the United States media,
and I didn't refine you as.
I understand. I just wanted to make that clear to our viewers that we did cover that. But just to be clear, you do believe if the United States was responsible, that the Pentagon should acknowledge that they accidentally hit a girls' school.
Yeah, I've said that. I said it seems that they've already acknowledging all those things. I think largely that letter, it was rendered moot at this point after that's already come out. Now the Pentagon has agreed that they were behind that. And I don't know what your network talked about, but what I'm saying that whether like it's the New York Times, they're making it more and more trying to convince America that this has been a disaster or things are out of control. And that's just categorically not true on that.
I just think it deserves coverage. Obviously, given the number of children who were killed as a result of it, it obviously matters what happened there. We'll see what the Pentagon investigation says. Senator John Fetterman, I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for joining us as always here.
Yes. Oh, no, you don't have to cut me off here.
Go ahead, Senator. We're not cutting you off.
Well, you said something that it's appropriate to cover it. It is appropriate to cover it. It's a tragedy. Absolutely. And now if we were on that, it's entirely appropriate for her to apologize. If you're implying that I don't think it's wrong to cover it, that's just not true. Yes, it's being covered. I just want to clarify that. It just seemed like a short shut off there to imply that I didn't want to carry that, or I think it's entirely appropriate to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm not implying that. I just wanted to clarify why we're covering it for everyone who's watching. Senator, thank you. I do always appreciate hearing your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you.
Now here's the part of the interview that really raises even more questions. To be fair, Kaitlan Collins did try to challenge Senator Fetterman at a few points, and overall she handled the conversation reasonably well. But there were several moments where the pushback could have gone much further, especially when the discussion turned to the bombing of that girl's school. Fetterman suggested that the Pentagon had essentially acknowledged U.S. responsibility, but at the same time, the public messaging from the administration has been anything but clear. Early on, there were attempts to shift blame, even after reports pointed to weapon systems that strongly suggested U.S. involvement. And that's why this story matters so much. When a school is hit and children are killed, that is not something that should quietly fade out of the headlines. It deserves scrutiny, investigation, and transparency. Collins was absolutely right to point out that this is a story that needs continued coverage. But there's another claim from Fetterman that deserves a closer look. The idea that the United States simply does not strike civilians. History shows the situation is far more complicated than that. Over the course of past conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, there have been numerous documented incidents where civilian areas were hit during military operations. Investigations, reports, and independent journalism have all raised serious concerns about how some strikes were carried out. That's why many people today are far more skeptical when they hear officials insist that everything is under control or that mistakes are impossible. And that skepticism ties into the bigger question surrounding this entire conflict. Fetterman argues this isn't a war of choice. But critics point out something very simple. Iran did not launch a direct attack on the United States before this escalation. And that fact alone is why so many Americans are questioning the justification for entering yet another military confrontation in the region. At the end of the day, this debate isn't just about one interview on CNN. It's about accountability, transparency, and whether leaders in Washington are truly listening to the concerns of the public. So now I want to hear from you. Should Senator John Fetterman continue positioning himself as the lone Democrat defending this operation, or should more lawmakers be pushing back against it? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more.